Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 236 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
My name is Jordan Willis.
And boy, oh boy, it's just the four of us today. We've got a very special episode with these four beautiful faces. Make sure you're watching on YouTube because you can see how hot we are. We got a wonderful episode for you guys today, all about wind. That's right. This is the topic everybody's been asking for. We're talking about wind in video games. It goes deeper than you think. There are lots of ways that video games use wind mechanics, wind effects, and stuff like that. We're going to talk about some of our favorite examples and some of the many ways in which, you can utilize mechanics such as this in your game design. We're going to be getting into all that and more in the main topic. And then we've got lots of news and rumors we're going to be talking about in the news section. A little bit of a Black Friday deal sale going on right now on the eShop. We'll talk about some of that. Game Maker, for all you people looking to incorporate wind into your games, is available free for non-commercial use. We'll be talking about that. And then also F-Zero 99 might be getting an update. We'll talk about some of that stuff and more. But before we get into that, though, how's everybody doing? We have a good past week. How was your Thanksgivings?
My Thanksgivings were fine. I actually only had one, but it was, honestly, Thanksgiving was fine. We got together with my wife's family. It was pleasant to see everyone, which was nice. But it was just really nice to have the week off because I took a couple of days off from work. And that's the first time I've taken off since going back to work. So it was good. And I got to work on my game a little bit and just relax with the family. So back to the grind now, but had a good week.
I'm glad to hear it, man. Yeah, I was watching some of your stream the other day, your game dev stream.
Nice to be able to do that too.
Yeah, it's exciting to see, man. I can't wait to play the next build.
Yeah. So I also took an extended leave from my place of work because I went up. So yeah, I went up to the Wisconsin Dells for a weekend, the weekend before Thanksgiving. Spent it at the Kalahari with my friends for Colossal Con North, and I had a really good time with everything that we did up there. I did a lot of Fire Emblem swimsuits. That was like what I wore all weekend. Got to see Night of the Round live, which is a metal Final Fantasy band. So they did two sets. They did one Friday night and Saturday night. Friday night was their all Final Fantasy VII set list, which I didn't need to see. So we went to the Saturday night set, which was across all of the Final Fantasy games. And it was super awesome. Had a really good time with that. Bought a t-shirt, got the whole band to sign it. And then I did buy a Tactics Ogre art book because I found a vendor that was selling it for less than what it was being sold for online. And I was like, you know what? This is gorgeous. This is going to encourage me to finally play this. Because I bought it on sale about a year ago from now, I think. So need to get on that. And then my Thanksgiving was overall inoffensive. I spent a lot of time in a combine and with cows and just being up in farmland USA.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Farms, combine. I'll go next. It's just been really busy. So today was my first day back at work since the strikes are over. So I am now back working in the television industry.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It was cool to see everyone back and, people I saw were all in good spirits. So that was my day to day. But the past week, knowing that I was going back today, just trying to wrap some projects up. So I spent the better part of last week just helping my friend do all these little art things. We're doing a stop motion video. So I did spend probably 10 hours in 3 days just cutting things out because it's paper stop motion for that. And he was working on other stop motion while I was preparing for his next stop motion thing. So just trying to get that all wrapped up, try to have how that thing's wrapped up and feel better about going back to work and not being able to help as much with that. And then Thanksgiving was chill. Our family's kind of went through a down period where, people had kind of got older and died off. And then now like other people are having kids. So now it's like, it went from being like pretty quiet to like now it's like kind of chaotic a little bit, but it was fun to see everyone, and then I went over to my dad's and he made me a tres leches cake, which was beautiful. And then this weekend I continued shooting the feature film that I am a cinematographer for. We did our days 2 and 3. So it's just like one thing after the other. So I'm like a little zonked, but happy to be here with y'all talking about wind.
Yeah, right. How's the feature going? Is it a good experience so far?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really like working with the dudes. I had done a short with him right before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, he was already kind of like ramping up to try to shoot a feature. That kind of like went out the window, but he, just spent that time honing in on the script and like editing and stuff. So, I just like working with him because we're very small skeleton crew, really bare bones. Like how can you make a movie with the least amount of people possible, but just like working with those limitations to make the best product possible. And I love like working within limitations because it facilitates creativity for me.
Nice.
So far it's been really good. And I'm shooting on kind of one of the nicer cameras I've ever used. So all the footage is looking better than most footage I've ever shot in my life. So that's incredible. And we've got the like nice cinema lenses, and I'm just really stoked like about where it's going. So out of the 3 days, I'd say all the footage is like really solid. So after this weekend, I'm like even more excited to just like keep going on the project, but it's just going to be really piecemeal because we're going to be filming it on the weekends. So
yeah. I bet. That's exciting though, man. I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Shooting a feature is a crazy endeavor. I'm doing okay myself. I unfortunately did not go home for Thanksgiving. I was sick as a dog. I got the flu, I think, but I had like 102 fever on Thanksgiving, and I had like the chills and body aches and shit like that. It was really annoying. I'm on the other side of it now, which is good. I'm on antibiotics, so that's good. But it wasn't too bad. I mean, I watched the Beatles Get Back documentary for the 4th time on Thanksgiving. So I spent Thanksgiving with the lads. That was a pretty good time. I really enjoy it. Every time I watch that, I find something new in it. And then also shout out to Robert Traylor and also my friend James Renovich. They both brought me Thanksgiving leftovers on the day when I was sick. So that was nice. I still got some Thanksgiving food. So thanks to both of those guys. That was good. But other than that, just back at work myself. Everything's starting to get really busy, but a lot of really cool stuff is happening. We're hitting a lot of like really big milestones at work, and so we got lots of cool stuff hopefully to show pretty soon.
Well, our last episode was about the Super Mario RPG remake, and we got a lot of comments on other things we discussed on that episode. Cena on the Discord mentioned that Beetle should be played by Colin Kaepernick in the Legend of Zelda movie, and he put a nice side-by-side there, and I'm on board.
Does he even know how to act?
He knows how to kneel. Or
what Beetle is famous for in the games. Yes, perfect.
Cena also pointed out that the Super Switch colored buttons on the Super Mario RPG remake might not be about the Super Switch, but might be about a reference to the original Super Mario RPG in Japan. But
who can say?
Why not both?
DCD was rather upset that I admitted that I don't eat Domino's pizza.
A lot of people are really upset.
Okay, a lot of people are upset at me right now for various things.
Various things. Wait, what are you?
As much as David wanted to be the heel of the show, I think it's me, and I think other Dylan even posted a heel emoji next to that picture that somebody made of me.
I think we're all just on a bad boy turn right now. Yeah.
Well, anyway.
We're the bad boys of Nintendo, baby. Hell yeah.
I don't know Jack either said they wish listed my game Monochrome Heights, which I asked folks to do if they could. So I appreciate that. And then Cool Uncle Vince, like Jay, also thought Croco from Super Mario RPG had clothes or a bow tie or something and shared the original sprite sheet, and I can totally see why. Over on our YouTube, Scary Fingers 101 said, David, will you please try out to play Funky Kong in the live action Donkey Kong movie?
I will.
And David Sprowlix then said, David, will you please try out to play Dixie Kong in the live Donkey Kong movie?
I'll consider it, but I don't want to take roles away from female apes.
You're going to be like the Eddie Murphy of that movie. Play all the parts.
Yeah, instead of the clumps, it's the Kongs, and I play every Kong. I will be doing this, Nintendo.
Can you just include
Hit
a
up my
scene
people.
where it's just all the Kongs sitting around a table farting for like 10 minutes? Is that something you could do?
I literally already have that in my house, ready to go. I'm ready to sign the paperwork, Nintendo.
Oh, good stuff. And Sprowlix was also surprised when I said I was going to watch the Pokemon Concierge show, which is another thing I was getting dragged for. Is my dislike of Pokemon.
Good.
It looks incredible.
Regardless of whether you like Pokemon or not, it looks good. If you just like stop motion, if you like good animation.
It looks almost as good as my version of the Kongs, starring me as all the Kongs farting around the table.
Which means it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good then. Yeah.
Can't wait to see the best adaptation category in the Game Awards next year.
Yeah. What's crazy is that you can actually be nominated more than once. So I'm expecting a sweep.
David as Donkey Kong. David as Dixie Kong. David,
Right, 'cause they're gonna add
as Mankey, the shunned Kong.
They're going to add supporting role next year, right?
Hey, don't spoil the news.
Oh boy, good stuff. Okay. If you two want to be shouted out, then respond to our episode somewhere online or send us a message with any of your thoughts on anything we talk about on this week's episode. And also, don't forget, like David said earlier, to hop on YouTube and watch there and hit like and subscribe.
Yeah. I hope people like this intro section of the podcast because it is expanding every week. Notice that.
All right.
Anyway.
We're
We just have too many things to say.
We'll go quickly through the other stuff then.
The real meat and potatoes is the intro of the podcast.
Oh boy, but we'll move on to the news. And we're opening up with some news related to Nintendo Switch Online. And starting off is that Nintendo's announced that Jet Force Gemini is going to be coming to the Nintendo 64 app, which you only get if you have the expansion pack, the more expensive tier. But let's talk about this for a minute, because I'm going to be honest with y'all. I don't know much about Jet Force Gemini. I think that was just something that I missed. What is Jet Force Gemini? It was a Rare game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a third-person shooter.
Yeah, it's a third-person shooter, Rare game. I think it's got some like puzzly elements. I'll be honest, this game also passed me by. This is one of the few Rare games, one of the rare games that I did not play on the N64. I was always really interested in it, but it just I just didn't get around to it, right? And so I do understand that this game has some multiplayer and has some co-op. I believe it's kind of like Mario Galaxy style co-op where one person is a little more limited as a player. But the one thing I do hear about this game a lot is that the controls haven't aged very well. So yeah, I know that's a problem for you often, Patrick. So hopefully there's some kind of modernization there, or some sort of method they can do in order to bring this up to speed. But either way, it's great to see more Rare games come to the service, because there's a lot more Rare games that I want to see come to NSO.
I feel like this is going to be a situation like GoldenEye where you can like remap the buttons to be like a better control scheme. Because I tried to play this as on Rare Replay on Xbox a few years back, and it was hard to play at first. And then they had like a modernization control scheme, which I doubt will be in this. But
I do know the original had multiple control options that people don't often use because the N64 controller is so fucking weird and everybody's used to using it one way. So maybe one of those will just kind of translate well to, that kind of ended up happening with GoldenEye. So I don't know. We'll have to see.
We will see. But we're talking about GoldenEye as well. And I think this is interesting. It is not relevant to people outside Japan, maybe. But in Japan, GoldenEye is not yet available on the N64 app, and Jet Force Gemini and GoldenEye are going to be coming on a separate 18+ Nintendo 64 app.
Scandalous.
Yeah, and I when I first heard this news, everybody was talking about it kind of like it was going to happen everywhere or something. And I think there's maybe a little misunderstanding about that. And I think that's because in Japan there are laws, I presume, about ratings and that sort of thing, and who can have these games. And in the US, while we have the ESRB and that sort of thing, there's not like a specific law. It is just a self-regulated thing. So, and I also, somebody was saying, I think it might have been Cool Uncle Vince, that like, if your account is under 18, you can't install the N64 app without like your parents' approval or anything like that. Oh. So, in the US. So,
yeah. I know GoldenEye has a 0Z rating in Japan, which is 18 plus, which I think is probably part of the reason why it took so long to get GoldenEye out in any form over all these years. You know what I mean? It was always a very restrictive rating in Japan. I do wonder if, we do see more, if we see M-rated Switch games coming. There are multiple rare M-rated Nintendo 64 games, namely Conker's Bad Fur Day and Perfect Dark, both of which people want to see come to the service. I wonder if it would be the same thing here, if that we would have an 18 plus app as well. I think it's stupid. I think you should just have parental controls in the app, but I guess that's just not how Nintendo wants to build their apps. But
yeah, the whole app thing is kind of stupid, if you ask me. The way that we have now, it was fine when there were like one or two systems, but now it's like it'd be kind of nice if they were all in one.
I'd like to see on Super Switch just an NSO app that has all the emulators in it. I think that would be a lot better.
And a better UI of not like some boxes are this half your screen and then anyway, not what we're talking about. And then sort of last NSO news is that, and I guess they've done this before, but I missed it last time, that if you are renewing your Nintendo Switch Online subscription, then you get a bonus of gold points. You earn 20% gold points on your purchase of the renewal, which is kind of annoying because I've just renewed mine in October, like a lot of people did, because that's when they like the major renewal season is. But I'm not complaining. Happy for all the people who's timed out well.
I'm not. They should have to pay the extra I had to pay. Just kidding.
I'm against student loan forgiveness.
And
healthcare for all, because
exactly
not what I got.
Or they could, I don't know, throw a little bonus something to the people who already renewed.
Yeah, I mean that's what I just checked to see if it would do that, like automatically, just like, oh, you renewed, you just get the coins. But no,
the fine print is like the offer is only valid from November 21st to December 6th. So if you're in that range, you get a little bit extra.
I mean, that's purposeful. They just don't want to like give a bunch of free money out to as many people as possible. It's like just the people that were maybe stragglers, right?
And if you want some super wild speculation, I heard some people say that the last time they did this was like a couple of months before they announced the Switch OLED. So this means that in a couple of months they're going to announce the Super Switch. So
yes, we love it.
Rumors.
That's how they time these things. That have nothing to do with that out.
Yeah, Nintendo always follows the strict deadline on every announcement. Real quick before we do move on from NSO games, isn't it queer that we haven't seen 1080 snowboarding? They said 1080 snowboarding was going to be the final game for the roadmap, the 2023 roadmap, and we got Jet Force Gemini instead. It's a little weird. What happened there?
Tommy Hilfiger is holding out for more money.
Do you think so?
No, I don't. I think they were like Tommy Hilfiger branded clothes.
Yeah. And it's just a little strange. This was like out of nowhere, and we had one still that we're waiting on. It's just crazy that hasn't come out yet.
They've been doing that with the N64. They did that with GoldenEye too, right? Where like there were a bunch of games they had said, and then they threw GoldenEye. I don't know why they're...
Maybe it's just rare games, so like outside the agreement.
Yeah, like they're individually getting them. Jordan?
It just adds more to your theory, or like, why is the release cadence of Nintendo so bizarre right now? I feel like you're talking about that, but Yeah, they're just waiting for the true winter solstice to drop this game. It's a snow game. You gotta wait till the end of December. It's perfect sense.
Who knows? But we can move on to, obviously with Thanksgiving, there is sales on all sorts of things everywhere. And one of the things that has dominated video game news is just sales on all the different platforms. And there is currently an eShop sale that I think is either the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale that's going to continue. You have until basically the end of this weekend to check out the current sales. Have anybody here looked at what's currently on sales or any good deals right now? I know there's a few things that are discounted.
I only picked up stuff on my Steam Deck for sales this go around, which has been cool. There's actually a bunch of stuff I already owned on Switch that I rebought on Steam, which is kind of weird. But there's some good stuff on here. I'm just kind of going through some like comments that I'm seeing on this Reddit post about it. But like Portal Companion Collection, 2 Portal games for under $7 is an incredible deal if you've never played those games. Has Gyro on Switch. And then Red Dead Redemption, which was like $60 not too long ago, is like $35 right now, which is a pretty fucking great deal for a game like that. There's tons of little game deals like all over the place. Too much really to talk about. But it's definitely worth checking out like Deku deals and seeing if there's anything that's been in your backlog or stuff you've been eyeing for a while that you want to check out.
Well, then we'll move a little bit away from Nintendo for a second to talk about Game Maker, which is a engine to build video games in. It's not one that I am terribly familiar with in terms of never tried it out. But I do know of several, indie games and such that were made using Game Maker.
Mm-hmm.
Tons. Game Maker is apparently changing its pricing model. It will now be free for non-commercial use on all platforms, excluding console. So I think you can't push like a console build, which kind of makes sense because there's no way to be on a console non-commercially, really. Number one, that's cool. That's not the only thing, though. Maybe the more cool thing is that they said that they're going to be getting rid of their subscriptions and it's going to be a one-time license. Does everybody remember the days when you could buy software once and then just own it?
Yep.
They might have been expensive, but it was damn better than it being expensive every year.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, I don't know. And they're making a bunch of other positive changes, like giving some of their asset bundles out for free. And on the Twitter posts, like there was a really great comments with people asking questions and stuff. And like Godot posts and says, any plans on open sourcing? And they say, stay tuned. So who knows what all that means, but Game Maker is using this opportunity to position itself well as a good alternative. So if you're out looking for engines for your wind game, definitely consider that.
Yeah, I think Game Maker is a lot simpler of an engine for indie and 2D platforming stuff in particular. You don't need to know nearly as much code as you would for something like Unity or Godot or a lot of these other platforms. It's got kind of its own code set, but it's, from what I understand, and I follow Rami Ismail, good guy who's a friend of mine, game dev on Twitter, and he was saying that, and obviously he used to work for Vlambeer, and they've utilized Game Maker a lot. And Game Maker is a great prototyping tool, right? So it's like if you want to just try out some systems, see if a game idea you have even holds water, it's like a quick and easy way to prototype a game. And so for those purposes, especially with it being free now, this is like a no-brainer software to download if you want to have this like in your tool belt, right? So I think for that purpose alone, it's really, really awesome that they've made this free. So good on them. I'm really excited to check this out, to be honest.
Nice. We'll move on to the Game Awards, which are happening pretty soon, actually, right? We're fast approaching the Game Awards, but I guess Jeff Keighley was doing a Twitch Q&A, and it came up that people were asking about additional categories and that sort of thing, and he spoke a bit on that and said that they're always considering new categories, and and I don't think there's anything new this year, but that there was specifically mention of like DLC, but he kind of framed that as being like the ongoing game category. And there was also talk about remakes and remasters, which I think might make sense, even though he was like, I don't know if there's enough amazing remakes every year. But it sure seems like we're
that's fucking
there.
bullshit. Yeah,
Like,
you could fill up like 4 different categories with remakes. Honestly, like there are so many remakes this year.
Got one in his
going.
Best game of the year too.
Exactly.
And then also there was, I thought with the or also there's talk about like a best supporting actor. And I thought his response to that was interesting, which was that, we get a lot of criticism, or this wasn't the only thing he said, but I thought he said we get a lot of criticism about being very narrative focused and not gameplay focused. And that would maybe be like even more of that. And I thought that was interesting because I think that's kind of true. A little bit.
Yeah, but
how y'all feel about that?
But I mean, like, competitive games also have voice actors, and actors in them. I don't think that that's mutually exclusive. I think that they should absolutely. First of all, I think the best remaster category is a fucking no brainer. Do it, add it in. I think that's a no brainer. I think best supporting. I think there should be 2 performance categories, right?
Absolutely.
At the very least. I mean, and if not, best actor and best supporting, best voice acting and best performance capture, right? Because those are 2 very different styles of acting. You know what I mean? A lot of times it's lumped into one. I think that if you either do one or the other, but I think that there deserves to be more representation from performers in video games at this point, because almost every game has them now, as that are in the AAA space anyway, right? Also, I think we need more. I think best sports and racing are combined as one category right now, which is bullshit.
There's enough of each that come out every year that they could split them up. I agree.
There's been no F-099 representation because sports and racing are in the same category, and so it's like they could split that up and get rid of fucking esports coach. We do not need that category, right?
So, as much as I like wonder about the esports categories, I do think esports makes enough money, and that's why they have to have that that representation. I do think that they could just continue to have more awards categories. Period. Though, I am one of those people who actually really enjoys the awards part of the Game Awards, and I actually feel a little like I get a little upset for the nominees of categories because they always bum rush through some of these awards to make more space for the advertisements. And then we end up getting like 10 of the exact same Magic the Gathering award during that like 3-hour night. And I personally would love it if they took more time for more of those awards, but also in that same coin, like if you're going to keep bum rushing all of these awards, there's no reason you can't just add more awards too.
That's what I was going to say. Like just give more awards and less time to certain things, but they already go through them quick. Why not just add a few more?
Exactly. They're going to get some 70-year-old actor that's never played a video game before on that stage at the opening, and he's going to talk for 20 minutes. And then
that's Al Pacino you're talking about, man.
You're right. It is Al Pacino I'm talking about. He's like, oh, my grandkids play video games. Okay. And like
Al Pacino can talk for as long as he wants on whatever show he wants.
Award shows are in a very weird place because like while I was not working, I did a research study. I should probably am not allowed to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Where I watched the VMAs, which was 4 hours long. Okay. And they gave away like 15 awards in 4 hours. I'm like, what is happening? Because it's all just musical performances, which is really just ads for the music industry. And then they would even have like cutaways for like a band would literally play for like 1 minute and then cut back too. And like, it was just such a weird and bizarre paced show. But then you watch something like the Oscars, which is like all there are some advertisements, but it's
they've started doing it. They did a trailer for Little Mermaid last year it's like the game awardsification of the Oscars has begun.
It's like
no,
it has
not
happened.
What I want, dude. I just want more awards. But I guess like for me, I was like when I was reading it, I think it's 31 awards. So I'm like, okay, you're at least doing better than the VMAs, but you're like a little bit behind the Oscars. I don't know.
Viewership has gone down year on year for the Oscars, so there's no good solution. But I mean, like, give us a best fucking remake category, man. I mean, it's like there's so many goddamn remakes. Anyway, we should probably move on.
We will talk more about the Game Awards soon, I'm sure. We are going to talk about kids and Christmas is what we're going to talk about. So there's been, I guess, like, speaking of studies, there's been a survey that showed that in terms of like Christmas wish lists for children, we're talking about ages 10 to 17, while many of them are requesting video game type presents, it is a large percentage of it is more like V-Bucks and Mine Coins and subscriptions and in-game currency for presumably live service games. And that doesn't surprise me. I think those are the popular games, right? I mean, I think that Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite are very popular in that age range. And if you look at my kid, he's the same. He wants Mine Coins. I mean, but I also buy every video game that comes out that he could want already. So
yeah.
Maybe that's just the case for every child gamer.
Yeah,
increasingly so.
All their dads host Nintendo podcasts.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of like hand wringing over this, but I don't know. How do y'all feel? I don't really feel that worried about this. Like, I think those are the popular games for kids. I don't know what to say. You know,
worried isn't quite the right word for how I feel about this. I think it definitely speaks to what the gaming climate is for that age range. Now there is the other component of, an episode that we recently had about how predatory these game models are. And knowing that the main target is children for them, and that this is just their main exposure to what gaming is these games that are, initially free to play, and they want money to spend in those games now. Now that being said, I do think it's good that they're asking for it as a gift as opposed to like regularly spending money in that. It's like, oh, this is the game that you always play. You don't spend money on it. Sure, spend some money on it for Christmas. Like that, I can see it from that side too. So I don't know, like, is it alarming feels like too harsh of a word?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think if anything, this is like a trend towards like next generation is going to be the last generation of consoles with physical games.
That was the other thing I wanted to say is that, like, this, I think it's somewhat.
There's no question about it, Yeah.
Somewhat, it's like physical games are going away, so it's hard to give somebody a game, right?
Yeah,
like
kids just don't care about discs or physical, Well, it's like we do, but that's, I don't think that it's nice to have something under the tree, but it's like they're just not interested in that anymore,
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it too. It's hard to suss out what's what, but I think it's all of those things.
They don't have the experience of servers going down yet, so that's why they don't understand to ask for physical media.
Oh, they do, and they throw fits.
But different servers going down. Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, is there anything else on this study that y'all want to say, or anything else? We'll move on. We'll move on to a live service game that's getting an update that we want to talk about.
I have to ask for Christmas,
and that's F-Zero 99 is getting an update.
I need my F-Bucks, Dad. Give me F-Bucks for F-Zero 99.
Not F-Bucks, no.
And this is, I think the Nintendo of Japan has just announced that this is coming out. It'll be out presumably around the time that our episode actually comes out. But thanks to our data miner friend Oatmeal Dome, we have a sense of what is actually going to be coming. They're saying it's a new game mode called Classic Race, and that it will more closely resemble the original Super Nintendo game with smaller courses is what they say, which I mean probably means just no intro segment. Only 20 machines on the race instead of 99. And getting rid of some of the new mechanics like the boosts and spin attacks and Skyway and stuff like that. So what do we think about this? Is this a mode you're interested to play or wait and see?
I mean, Yeah, I mean, by the time this episode is out, I'll have already been playing this, right? So I'm sure I'll talk more about it next week. It's a little weird that, they made it 4:3. They like just artificially cropped off the sides to, there's a Nintendo Everything has a lot more details and screenshots on an article I'm looking at here, but it's, they cropped down the sides. They removed the feature that I liked about this game is that it had F-Zero X style boosting and healing. You boost out of your HP meter mechanics. That's what I like about F-Zero personally. I don't love the boosts per thing. And I love the spin attack and all that kind of stuff. That's stuff I like about F-Zero 99. That said, this is the first and only time we'll ever be able to play the original F-Zero multiplayer with 20 people online. That's pretty fucking cool. I wish that there was also a mode that had all the new stuff that were just smaller races with online people. And I hope that we could play this with our friends because, the original F-Zero for Super Nintendo was a single player only game. There was no multiplayer in that. Right. So, so that is cool that we'll be able to play this online. And honestly, this game is kind of fucking dead right now. It pains me to say that, but you don't get 99 person races when you like go into F-Zero 99 these days, right? It's like about 20 people and the rest is bots. So anything it can do to breathe some life back into this game, especially a mode that doesn't require 99 people when a lot of people have dropped it, that's probably for the best. So this is a good time to do it right now until hopefully we get some more actual like hard content to keep this game alive.
That's what I was wondering.
Again, that's like Nintendo's weird release cadence. They dropped that game and then put out like 3 or 4 big games
Bangers
in a row. Yeah. And it was a weird timing. I know I got pulled away to play, various other games. And anyway, another conversation, but that is coming and we'll see if that breathes new life into it, like you said.
I'm really happy to see more content.
And then I don't have pretty slides for this, but David, it looks like there's maybe been some Tetris 99.
Yeah. I also found out there are 2 new Maximus Cups announced for Tetris 99 as well. We've got on 11/30, there's a WarioWare Move It Maximus Cup. And then on the 14th of December, there's a Mario Wonder Tetris Maximus Cup. So my Tetris Cup overfloweth as well. I'm excited about this. Every time a Maximus Cup happens, it's just another excuse to play Tetris 99. I'm excited for both of these.
How does the Maximus Cup cadence work? Because Super Mario RPG already got one. And also, didn't Mario Wonder come out before WarioWare Move It?
Yo, there was just a fucking Xenoblade Chronicles 3 one like a month ago. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Yeah, they do this instead of themes for the Switch. They do Maximus Cups for Tetris 99. So it's just kind of whenever they feel like it.
Give me the themes. Anyway, I was just curious if you had more insight because I'm like, this seems insanely random to me.
Yeah. Maybe the next theme will be wind.
Well, I don't know about the next theme, but the next segment on our show is definitely going to be about wind. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking all about wind as a mechanic and as an atmospheric thing in video games. We are back, and this week we are talking about wind. Wind in video games, wind as a mechanic. The idea for this came up when on the Discord we were kind of talking about wind in platformer games. As I was working on my game Monochrome Heights, I was adding in wind and thinking about it, and was thinking, do people even like wind levels in platformer games, or is it one of the more maligned and hated mechanics, kind of like Underwater? And I don't know. I think I was surprised to see that people, well, like anything, some people like it, some people don't. And then also how it's implemented can matter. And we were like, this is a surprisingly deep conversation, or could be. And so we decided to do it. And here we are talking about wind.
This will either be a surprisingly enlightening conversation about a not often talked about mechanic in a video game, or a bit episode. And we'll just have to see
why not both?
Which one it turns into. Yeah, exactly.
Listen and find out, because we don't know.
But I think because of that, what sparked this idea, and because I think it's one of the places that can be used in an interesting way, we maybe start with platformers, 2D platformers in particular. and wind as a mechanic in those games. I think there's a lot of really good examples. I don't know that it's the very first, but I do believe that the Lost Levels, or Super Mario Bros. 2 as it was known in Japan, is maybe one of the earlier ones, right? They had, what was it, 7-3 had wind in it. And
yeah, I think there was wind before that as well, but that is definitely one of the notable wind stages. There's a bunch of weird shit in that game, like the springs like send you incredibly high into the air, right? And then you couple that with wind mechanics like happens in 7-3, and it just becomes the reason that a lot of people fucking hate this game, to be honest. Just really obtuse and difficult for no reason.
I said 7-3 because that's what I was shown in the video, and that's what it was on.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it's one of the earlier levels which introduces it. But then the spring gives you the ability to ride the wind for a long time to make it to a far off platform. Mm-hmm. And I think that in that game, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the wind is there and it's constantly there. Mm-hmm. It's not like on a cycle or a rhythm like some wind in some games, some platforming games is. But I think that's one of the types, right? Like just constant wind. I think obviously that game probably didn't do it perfectly, but I do think Celeste did it very well, which has constant wind on some levels or some areas. Sometimes you're fighting against the wind, and sometimes you're fighting or you're going with the wind. It's just well done in Celeste.
Yeah, I think Celeste has a really good implementation of it in that, like, Celeste kind of was originally a Pico 8 game, right? So it was like originally based on like single screen, or not necessarily always single screen, but like scrolling areas, right? So Celeste kind of does it in a cool way to where within one level, depending on the screen that you move on to, the wind will be kind of going in a different direction, right? And so that kind of takes that basic idea from Super Mario Bros. 2 or the Lost Levels and kind of builds on it in a much more interesting way.
And then I think I don't know if it's the retro, the one that we should talk about is Donkey Kong Country 2, right? The gusty glade level. Is that the first instance in Donkey Kong?
I think so, yeah. There have been more past Donkey Kong Country 2, but I think that was one of the first stages that had it, yeah.
And that's where it's the rhythm, right?
Right, yeah. That one's got, all of these have like leaves that kind of like go across the screen as like an indication of the wind. And I think that Gusty Glade did it to where, you could see what direction it's going based on the direction of the leaves. So it would kind of like go in a rhythm, forward, and then it would, like, every jump that you would make, you could make even farther platforming jumps than you would normally be able to. Or it would be going back, and then all of a sudden your jumps would be kind of hindered when the wind is working against you. And you had to kind of like pay attention to the foreground elements in that level, which is something else that they did like in the original Donkey Kong Country with like the snow. They had foreground snow on that one stage where it would become kind of a blizzard and make it harder to see. That was just one of the many ways that Donkey Kong Country would use foreground sprites to change up and spruce up the levels a little bit. But yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think it can be frustrating, right? And I think that's why maybe sometimes this mechanic is disliked. And I think the example of like constant wind that's with really long distances and precise jumps where it can be frustrating, or even a cycle, right? I think it's just like to do it right. What do we need to do to have to do it right? I think good indicators, good visual sound effect, indicators so when it's switching, if it's switching, can really help deal with the frustration. I think the design of the level and the layout, it can feel really fun and satisfying, or it can feel really frustrating. And so I think it's like, it's not the wind's fault, right? It's if it's poorly implemented. Because sometimes it's a really awesome mechanic. And I think we've listed a couple examples. Most of those, like Donkey Kong Country does it really well. Celeste does it well.
I personally like in wind, like in games where it kind of combines two of the elements that you're saying, where it like pushes a character constantly and then also moves in a rhythm. So it pushes the character constantly in a rhythm, if that makes sense, So like you're stuck and you have to go at certain exact timing. So it almost creates like a rhythm platformer. So in a game where you're just running through levels, suddenly you're kind of thrown this new mechanic that makes you reevaluate how you play the game, because it becomes more of a rhythm game instead of just a straight platformer. And so that, to me, is where I really like wind levels personally. So if it can kind of just break up the monotony of the regular set of the game, I'm a fan of that. But yeah,
I think you're right on the money there, Jordan. And I feel the same way. It's like, I think that, and you brought this up earlier too, Patrick, that it's not as maligned as, say, like water levels, which are also kind of the whole point of that is to break up, gameplay, the kind of sameness of gameplay, right? And so I think something that I've always appreciated about wind stages is that it's much less of a, like, oh, everything comes grinding to a halt, like with a water level. I have to completely change up my play style and the way that I'm doing platforming. It's just either a slight hindrance or a slight boost, right? And so I think another kind of way that some games will do this sometimes is like the touch fuzzy get dizzy, or like in that from Yoshi's Island, or also I think in Donkey Kong Country 3 they did this a few times where you would like run into some poison or whatever that makes your controls flipped. Like where all of a sudden like left is right and right is left, where it's still basically doing the same thing. It's just something that makes it a little bit more challenging. And you all of a sudden like have to kind of like snap out of it and like wake up from the like kind of autopilot of muscle memory that you've been getting into as you've been playing a platforming game. And so I think this is one of the better mechanics to kind of spruce up gameplay in that way. And I think any good mechanic is like that. Yeah. We talked about this a lot in the podcast episode about Monochrome Heights, but it's like, that's, why you introduce new mechanics gradually as you go, is to gradually increase the difficulty. And I think this is just a really interesting one that keeps most of the gameplay the same, but just adds a little bit of a twist.
Yeah. And I think the other way this is implemented that we haven't really talked about, but it's sort of a continuation of both those ideas, is like an item or object or enemy that has wind, right? Like a fan or some sort of thing that blows, or the whooshes and other. There's a lot of them in Mario games. I didn't research every different type of name of those things.
Those are the big clouds.
Those are the clouds that blow. You can blow you in certain Mario games, or blow different things. Yeah. And then in Shovel Knight, which maybe is a good example of this too. There's fans, right?
The level is called the Flying Machine, and it's where Propeller Knight lives. And it's one of the, and kind of to what David was saying, like I think the implementation of it in Shovel Knight is perfect, because it's like almost the last level. It's like the level before you go on to do the final levels of Shovel Knight. So that's like that's that game's, hey, yeah, this is how we're going to change things up here at the end. And you get wind from all different directions. And then and then once you figure out how to use the wind, then, you show your mastery of it in the final boss fight with Propeller Knight.
And I do think Shovel Knight does a great job. And we're not really seeing it in this video right now, but of the progression of it. Because it kind of starts with simple fans and then more area wind and different directions. And I think like any good mechanic, right? It's not just used once in one way. They can kind of iterate on it and get you used to it and that sort of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. When it starts changing directions in that stage, that's when it starts to get really difficult. Also, they line all the walls with fucking spikes. So it's like, if you're not paying attention to where the wind is blowing you, like it'll just kill you. Right.
Yeah. But I think that like the idea of objects, I mean, sometimes it could be an object that's creating wind for a whole level, but like to have little smaller segments of wind is really cool, and a nice way to make it maybe even more of a small mix up than like you said, like an underwater level, which is its own topic for another episode, maybe.
Yeah. We're running out of ideas, so we're doing every platformer mechanic as different episodes. But I think something also that like wind or like gusty glade style wind mechanics and platformers can bring to the table is platformers so often You're just trying to bust your ass from left to right as quickly as possible, right? Something I like about the way that like Donkey Kong Country does it and like Mario has done it in previous games is it kind of purposefully makes you slow down a little bit, right? It's like, oh, if I don't practice a little bit of patience here, like there are other mechanics that are similar to this, like in Donkey Kong Country Returns, like there's that one stage where there's like big tidal waves coming from the background to the foreground, and you have to like hide behind certain platforms in order to get it not to hit you. I think there's also wind stages that do that too, where you have to kind of like hide behind things that block the wind. Stuff like that is kind of like, okay, let me wait for the gust to go by and then I can start to go, right? So it's kind of like taking advantage of the fact that you've been going on autopilot for a little bit to kind of be like, okay, well now let's see if you can actually practice the virtue of patience, right? And sometimes that can be a really cool way to break up the gameplay as well.
Totally. I don't know. I feel like platformers is one of the places that this really shows up a lot in an obvious way. And so I want to give space if there's anything else. I mean, not that we can't jump back to platformers. If there's either any specific games, we talked a lot about 2D. I couldn't think of many times that it happens in 3D games, though I'm sure it does. And I know, like we're talking about,
you've got
swooshes in Mario and Mario Odyssey, you blow things, and there are probably times when they push you off of platforms, as I recall, in Odyssey and probably other 3D Mario games. But
yeah, and I mean, Mario Odyssey has the gusty gardens, right? Like that's where that comes from, right? And you've got the kind of flowers that you can ride up to different areas of the stage and stuff like that. And then obviously the things that blow you off. But Jordan, did you have one as well?
I like don't have a specific game that I'm thinking of in my mind, but the idea of like wind, usually in 3D games, where I like it is when it works in reverse, where like you can blow things with wind. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if because I'm just still thinking Minish Cap. You have kind of like a sucking and blowing thing. I'm really struggling. My brain is like mush. But there's like, I feel like in a 3D platformer, there is like something that blows things in the opposite, and that is also wind.
Kirby, right?
Kirby. Yeah. There's a lot of that in Kirby, and the trees blow you a lot in Kirby.
Yeah, but Kirby also can get like a whirlwind ability, I think, where can whip out little tornado gusts, as well as, we all know what Kirby primarily does, but
right
in the reverse. Yeah.
Suck.
There's just
Thank you, David.
He's like, I'm just like very specifically thinking of
that's a word.
Yeah.
You're thinking of like
you're thinking little Tazes running around.
Well, also like puzzles where you blow a fan and that spins and that like unlocks something else that you can.
I mean, you got that in the in Skyward Sword. There's the gust bellows item that you use for puzzles a lot.
That's
Skyward Sword.
Literally exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yay!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Teamwork.
Yeah, and
I
then
almost
like
put that on the show notes, but I left it off.
In the newer Zelda games too, right? You can have the Korok leaf, and then with Tears of the Kingdom, you can attach it to weapons and blow enemies away. Which I don't know it's that useful, but it's fun sometimes.
I mean, sometimes there's like treasure chests that are like under piles of sand, and then you can like blow away the sand with a leaf, or you can use your magnesis to lift it up out of the sand or whatever, right? So there's different ways to do it.
And Tulin, who will blow your treasure away when you're up on a platform in Tears of the Kingdom, much to your frustration when you're pressing A to open something or whatever, and you're
that's true. And Tulin is kind of the proprietor of wind in the Zelda games. Yeah, the manifestation of it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
my baby boy.
But we've kind of started to move away from platformers. Yeah. But I definitely, the first thing I was like, when I was trying to think of other genres of game, the first thing I thought of was sports and racing. Not because I like sports and racing games, but because I think, especially because I think wind can be done both. And I think this is interesting to talk about with sports games, can be done in both an arcadey and in a simulation way. Right, where you can have wind that just is big and blowing, and you have to kind of push through it in like a racing game, or in a like I think about like I don't know F-Zero, Deathwind, right? Like that's just constantly kind of blowing, and you kind of have to be fighting against it, right? Versus like some racing games where it's like it's coming from the north, and you know what I mean? Like,
well, oftentimes I mean, Deathwind is a great example for F-Zero, right? Because that's like gusty glade style, where you're like fighting against the wind to keep a line straight, right? Like that's very much 2D platformer style wind in a racing game. Now, I think the majority of times you see wind in racing games is in trying to avoid wind by like drafting behind cars, right? It's the kind of idea of like, if you're behind a vehicle, then they're taking the brunt of the wind as they're like out in front. That's just kind of normal real life physics, right? But it's like if you're drafting behind a vehicle, then you're not fighting wind resistance, so you can end up going faster. I mean, Mario Kart has that in it. It's very arcadified version of that, but it still is that basic idea of drafting against the wind, right?
When we were on our road trip this week, we had a luggage rack on the top of our vehicle, and we realized that we had like a noticeable load, so we were consistently like drafting behind semis. And the first time we realized to do it, I was like, this is just like Mario Kart.
Yeah. You got out from behind the semi and you got a boost. You're like,
yeah. Just like Mario Kart.
I think you have on here golf.
Yeah, I think
Patrick,
that's a big one.
That's one of the most classic ways that wind can subtly affect gameplay, but in pretty major ways, you know, like in golf games. It's like that's kind of where the fun of a golf game comes from, is the wind.
Unpopular opinion, but just seeing golf on this list makes me want to go back and play Mario Golf on the Switch, because it makes me feel like I have a big brain when I figure out how to properly use the wind in Mario Golf.
Against the wind. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, if it wasn't for wind and golf games, it would always just be point at the hole, press A for the right amount of time, and then you're in. Wind is kind of like what gives it the little bit of challenge that you have to figure out like how much to fight against it, that actually makes golf games, video games, really interesting. And so I think it's the main reason I actually really like that genre of game, despite not really liking the game of golf much at all in real life.
Yeah. And I don't play a lot of other sports games these days, but I do know that, you know, some simulation games for other sports games, more realistic ones, right? Like might have wind as a factor and you're passing in a football game or something like that. But I know it's not as common, but it's in some of them, right?
Sure.
So that was like another place that I thought of. And then I feel like things just kind of opened up, and then we're talking about wind in all sorts of different ways, right? Because we've been talking about it primarily as a game mechanic itself, but I think it can create mechanics in other ways. And I was thinking about like visibility with wind, which is kind of veering away towards like fog in some games and that sort of thing. And I don't know if sandstorms count as wind, but without wind, there wouldn't be a sandstorm, right? I guess. So yeah, I think it counts. But yeah, there are some games where like a wind storm might create visibility issues for you or for the enemies, right? When I was looking into this, I don't have much Metal Gear Solid experience, but isn't it used, David, in one of those games?
Yeah. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 5 is a game that takes place in the Middle East. And so a lot of that game is in sandy environments, right? And I think, you know, obviously the Metal Gear franchise is about being stealthy and sneaking into places and taking out enemies without being spotted. And having the cover of sandstorms is a huge benefit in that game, right? Because it's like, you know, especially when you're like, man, there's no fucking way in here. Like, this is really being patrolled. Sometimes the best way is to just like practice patience, like we were talking about earlier, but on a kind of grander scale, just kind of wait it out for a while and then wait for a sandstorm to hit. And then you've got like an in to finally make a little bit of headway to a point where you can then kind of continue carrying out stealth stuff to a point where it's not impossible to infiltrate a base or something like that, right? And then, you know, it's also a good thing about that game is that, you know, yeah, the wind and sandstorm mechanics are a great game mechanic, but it also is justified by the game's setting, by the game's story, by a lot of the narrative elements as well. So it's like the way that you really have a good game mechanic is when it's this blend of functionality and lore that make it all feel like it's justifiable and in its place and a part of the universe and not just there for the sake of being there, right?
Yeah, and somebody in the same topic put in Red Dead Redemption 2. Jordan, do you want to explain how they use wind there?
Yeah, so I mean, they use it in a somewhat similar manner, but not exactly. Like it adds, that game has some of the best weather effects I've ever seen in any video game. And as a game, as like an open world genre game, and having these realistic weather effects, it just completely immerses you in the world that you're supposed to exist in. Because in that game, you're in the expansive, the West, and just riding around on your horse. And then suddenly a storm's rolling in. Suddenly trees are blowing. There's like rain coming down. It just kind of really paints a better picture for you, and it immerses you way more within that world if it was just sunny all the time. Or, whenever it was like night and day cycles came into games, you're like, shit, this is it. But now it's like that next level of like, okay, how do we take that night and day cycle and then add like weather effects on top of it to make it more and more like your everyday life, to just really put you in that game world. And so that game, I think, has some incredible wind effects. I had found a video on YouTube. I didn't drop it in the link, but I was just like, where it literally someone just increased the wind on a static shot of Red Dead Redemption 2. And it's really fun to watch the trees go from like kind of blowing to like, okay, they're blowing a little bit more, to like full on back and forth blowing. And I'm like, man, this is really incredible. And when you're actually playing the game, it's not someone controlling it. It's just a variable, random, based on whatever weather algorithm is in that game. And I don't know. It's just, once you talked about the wind topic, I was like, well, how can you use that to put yourself in that game world even more?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of one of the things we have on here, which is like just a visual effect, right? Where it makes it more immersive. It's maybe doesn't have a gameplay mechanic, but just makes it feel more real and alive. And like, older games just might have had weirdly static backgrounds or whatever. Whereas now, like, new games being made have all these kind of systems and
yeah, man,
that thing.
You don't want to blow away your hat. You want to be like Mario 64. Get your hat blown off by the wind.
And I think that then ties in to one of our things here, which is how wind, when it's not just visual, but it is a visual element, but it also can interact with the physics systems of the game, which I don't know who added this one, but like there's a couple of mentions here, which I think are great examples. Does anybody want to take this?
Yeah, I put these on here. Like Far Cry 2 and Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom are good examples of like fire propagation systems in those games. I don't know that they're necessarily always just tied to wind. Off both of those games are in very like dry, grassy environments, particularly Far Cry 2, which takes place in Africa. So it's like a lot of dry land. And so basically, especially when the wind is picking up, if you throw a grenade into like a grassland area and it lights on fire, it can be really quick that like all of a sudden that will go to the grass around it and then to the trees. And because everything is so dry, all of a sudden what was once a serene, like calm environment is now like, you have to fucking run out of there or you will die immediately, And I think that, there have been lots of Far Cry games since Far Cry 2 that have done this much better. But this was one of the first games I can really think of where I was playing a game and being like, holy shit, like all of the physics systems are kind of playing together here, and then obviously that's kind of what Breath of the Wild is known for, is the interplay of its different physics and chemistry systems, right? And so, not only can wind be a thing on its own, but it can beget other sorts of mechanics. And I think that that's something that's really fascinating. But I think we're still kind of cracking. I think like, I think Breath of the Wild kind of opened that door even more. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more emergent physics and chemistry systems in games in a way that just further imitates life as best as we can.
I love like these two games as an example too, because like they kind of feel like they feel like they build on each other, because in Far Cry 2, I remember when I first played it, I was like, oh shit, all this grass is catching on fire. And then when I did it in Breath of the Wild, I was like, oh, I can use it as an updraft, and it creates a wind.
It creates
updraft.
wind. Yeah,
And then
exactly.
suddenly I'm like across, like I can go much further. It was just like such a sick realization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure some games already do this, but your point there, David, makes me think about like jet streams and things, and like flying games, like especially like I don't know, Pilot Wings type games.
Yeah, I put Pilot Wings in the notes here. Pilot Wings has a whole hang glider level that have updrafts that like literally the only way for you to get the altitude that you need in order to then land and complete the stage is to seek out these updrafts and like ride them up, right? I think when I was a kid that it was really hard for me to wrap my head around that actually. Just like how that works. But yeah, I think that's I don't know that Breath of the Wild would have the like upward paraglider stuff without Pilot Wings, to be honest. It was a pretty innovative mechanic at the time.
I think at this point, it's just kind of like, what other games use wind in interesting ways? And we have a lot of really, I think, great examples here, which open up different genres and different gameplay and different kind of things. Has anybody here played Ghost of Tsushima? I remember when Matthew played it and he talked about it. And so if you've out there played it and you have a comment, appreciate it. But I remember hearing that in that game, the wind was used as like a directional indicator or like a suggestion of where you should go, which I think is a really interesting use of wind, that it's like for an open world game, kind of like pointing you in the direction that maybe you should follow. That's not something I've seen in other games, or maybe it's subtly done elsewhere, but that's a cool idea for it.
Yeah, and the tech behind that game is kind of best in its class. I think that there's actually, if you're interested in this topic, which if you're still listening to this episode about fucking wind, then you probably are, there's an entire, I think it's like a 30-40 minute long GDC talk that the developers of Ghost of Tsushima did about their wind system and like how they created it in the game. Because I think like, yeah, there's like the functional aspects of the wind, kind of like when you set a waypoint on your map or whatever, the wind will kind of blow the grass in the direction that you need to go as a kind of a non-HUD way to show where you need to be without having to use the map or whatever. But in addition to that, it's just gorgeous. Like I've never really seen anything like it before. And it had this like beautiful, the game is kind of known for its long, thin strands of Japanese grass, right? And the way that the wind interplays with it just gives it this feel that, is very evocative of like, Kurosawa films and that kind of those visuals that we'd seen a lot of times over and over again. But this is the first time it's really been realized in such a realistic way in a game before. So I think it's definitely one of the most notable instances of wind in games.
Every time that wind is a hazard for Smash, like if I'm trying to get my spirits, I press Y to auto get something that turns it off. I'm not trying to be challenged when I'm collecting spirits. So that is a main instance of me being like, get the fuck out of here, wind.
Yeah, I might agree that Smash and wind is one of those places where I curse wind.
Now, if I'm playing with friends and it's just like the tree from Kirby, like that's funny. That's perfectly fine. When I'm trying to get my spirits taken care of, though, like I don't need this. I need it to be as easy as possible so I can get it done.
My kid likes to make Smash stages with lots of wind, and then we're just all stuck flying in the air, and it's like, this isn't fun.
I don't know. That actually sounds fun.
Yeah, I can't think of any other fighting game that has wind mechanics, to be honest.
Well, it's because Smash isn't a fighting game.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
a platform fighter. It definitely is showing its platforming side of platform
party.
fighter, right? Yeah.
Partying in the air.
What else we got here?
I'll go. I'll talk about Golden Sun because I when I was talking about wind in games, I was just trying to think about like what other games have wind, but it's not necessarily like a mechanic for movement whatsoever. And so, Golden Sun, you have your different spells or summons, and Jupiter is is the god or summon Jin. That is the word, Jin of wind. So, there's earth, wind, and fire in that game. And so you got all these like different wind spells. Like there's like a whirlwind, there's a wind slash. Like there's just like an interesting way. You see all these RPGs. Like, how do we represent all these spells? Like, let's take elements. And I want to say Golden Sun shout out specifically, just because I feel like a lot of RPGs use wind spells are kind of the weakest. But Golden Sun has a really nice like 4 balance system between all its different elements. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that, because that's a way that wind is used in video games that's pretty much completely aesthetic and maybe, balance wise, but as far as the movement goes, is not a factor whatsoever.
No, that's a really good point, Jordan. And I mean, I think, in RPGs, it's like, and just in all media, it's like the 4 elements are like so often fallen back on, like as categories of attacks or categories of styles of fighting or whatever, and wind is really brought up all the time and stuff like that. I think that's a category of a
JRPG. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Sea of Stars has wind attacks, and it's always that like it's always like a green crescent. You know what I mean? It's
that's how it is in Fire Emblem. It's like a green crescent.
Yeah. So I wonder where that originated from. That's kind of interesting to me. But yeah, we should definitely do one episode for every element. We should do a fire episode and a water episode and an earth episode as well. But
is anybody in here an air sign?
What's a Leo? I'm a Leo.
No, you're fire.
You're a
dude.
fire.
Okay. All the zodiac heads are like,
so like this is powering you right now, right? But
yeah,
this
I'm
is spreading you
propagating.
around.
Yeah, I'm burning up some African grassland right now. Yeah, don't take that out of context, but yeah, I mean, we could talk about a couple other examples real quick before we call it. I think one we have to talk about is Flower. This is a game made by the developers of Journey. That's a game where you literally play as the wind. Like that is the character that you play as is wind, right? And it's a gorgeous game where you're kind of like blowing around and bringing like flower petals with you throughout like a big grassy area. When that game first came out, that was fucking mind blowing. I'd never played anything like that before. The graphics were absolutely incredible, and I think that game still really holds up to this day. I think it's That Game Company is what the company is that made that game, and they make really unforgettable gaming experiences. So I think Flower has to be on this list as one of the standout wind games. If we're talking wind, you also got to give a shout out to the Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda. That wind is utilized in so many ways in that game, right? I think, obviously, so much of that game takes place on the sea and you're in a sailboat. And so, being sure to capture the wind with your sail in the right way will give you a big boost as you're moving around. Wind is also present in that game through the flute that you play. You play a woodwind instrument. So that's a big part of that game. And then also there's a lot of puzzles in dungeons that utilize wind as well. And I think that, it's just, that was kind of the whole theme of that game is wind. And so I think I definitely wanted to give a shout out there. And then I think finally the last game I wanted to give a shout out to is Tricky Towers, which is honestly one of my favorite games, one of my favorite party games. It's a kind of, if you're not familiar with Tricky Towers, it's a Tetris style game where you are trying to build up towers as high as you can instead of trying to make blocks disappear. And in one of the expert modes of this, you're building a tower with Tetris blocks against the wind. And what more can I say? It's Tetris with wind. It's amazing. And it's just really interesting the ways that you have to do it. It's like, you're so often trying to build a solid, thick base and then build up structurally as best you can. But whenever you're playing with the wind, you kind of can build out to the right in a way to where you're building against the wind, where you start to build these really strange structures. And if you're watching the video version right now, you're probably seeing some of it. And it's very chaotic, but it's really fun. And once you kind of like get it down, you feel really, really powerful. And this is one of my favorite games for that reason. And it's very, very fun. So I had to give a shout out to Tricky Towers as well.
Nice. Well, those are just some examples of how wind is used as a mechanic in game or as an element in games. And we just thought it would be cool to talk about this. So I think that's going to I'm sure we could continue with more examples and more discussion on this, but we're going to call it there. And also, if there's a game that you love that features wind in either a way we already talked about, but especially if it's in some other way, we'd love to hear from you. So do share that with us, and maybe we'll shout you out next time. And with that, we'll wrap up our discussion on wind in video games, and we'll take a short break and come back and talk about the games we've been playing recently. This week, me and my family, we beat Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
What?
Yeah, we finally did it. Yeah, it's such a great game. Like, and I'm glad I played it through with them because we made
Did you guys get all the standees?
No. The standees are kind of pointless in local play too.
You need them for 100%.
Yeah, we weren't going for 100%. There were several of those difficult challenge levels, which I think even if you had 3 like high, like people who really, I don't know what the word I want to use here is, but like are frustrating because like, you know, somebody's dying who's in the lead, and I don't know. Anyway,
terrible gamers is the word you're looking for.
It was a lot of fun, and I am now looking forward to beating some of the challenge stuff that we skipped or didn't get to, like the secret world stuff, because I haven't done a lot of that yet. So that was nice. And then honestly, I've been playing a lot of Minecraft with my kid. I've been really enjoying playing it with him. I probably wouldn't be playing it on my own, but we've just been playing survival together during this week when we had a lot of downtime. We played a lot of it. He's very knowledgeable about Minecraft, but he also doesn't like to like do certain parts of it. So those are the parts I'm most interested in, which is like the fighting and the like exploration and like digging into caves. And so we make a really good team. It's been a lot of fun. And so if he wants mine coins for Christmas, that's fine with me.
Yeah. That's sweet though.
But get them in a physical box.
Yeah, but we need something to
unlock something. Yeah.
But that's really mostly all I have to report, to be honest with you. So
I'll go because I'm pretty much the same as last week. So I keep going on Backpack Hero. I keep returning to it, and I'm like, I'm addicted. Like this is my new roguelite game that I really enjoy. I think my one main gripe on the Switch is that some of the menus load a little bit slow when you're back in your town. But again, yeah, it's like a game where you go through your runs through the dungeon, you come back and you build the town. But I think what I'm really enjoying about it is like when you come back to build the town, one, there's like the town building element of like you get to pick where everything goes, and there's like decorative elements and you can kind of whatever. But like the buildings that you build have upgrades so that you can have different types of runs within the dungeon parts of it, which is just like a really nice way to feed that gameplay loop. Because instead of just unlocking like, oh, I'm getting more powerful, it's like, no, it's like unlocking different ways to play the game, which is really cool. But yeah, something about like, I don't know what it is, but like when you go to like unlock it in the buildings, like it takes a weirdly long time to load, and I don't know if that's just, you know, it's the 1.0 version of this game, so I think it's still kind of working through a little bit of the kinks. But dude, I highly recommend this game. I keep coming back to it because it's just a really easy jump in and jump out. But then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to bed, I'm gonna lay in bed and play this for an hour, and then suddenly I'm like, shit, 3 hours have gone by, like I need to like actually sleep tonight. And then I've been continuing my Super Mario RPG run, and I'm actually really enjoying this game. I don't know, like I feel like I was like re-listening to the episode, and I was like, were we too down about it, whatever? But like, no, this game is fantastic. It is
I think it's my fault.
Up. It's not your fault. I think I was like already having similar thoughts, but I was just like, it is overall just an insanely joyous game, and that's really kind of like, you know, like the where I keep coming back to is like, how much do I enjoy a game? It's like, how much happiness or joy does it bring me while I'm actually playing the game? And the more I play Super Mario RPG, the happier I am with the game. So I'm really stoked to keep playing that all the way through. And then the last game I'm going to mention is because someone asked in it was Kyle, KSB OKC asked in the recommendations channel of the Discord. He goes, "Hey, has anyone played Lethal Company?" And some friends of mine peer pressured me. Peer pressure works, by the way, into buying this game. It's only $10. It's called Lethal Company, and it is like I call it a phasmophobia like, because that was the first style of game that I really was encountered this, where it's like a 4-player game, up to 4-player game, where you go into a place, have a certain objective, and then like have to escape, but the reality is you might die along the way. So this one is your space miners going onto moons of different planets, and you're trying to carry resources out, but the buildings you go into have different creatures and stuff, and it's all procedurally generated. But the fun really comes out when you're playing with 3 of your friends. The 4 of y'all are just trying to run around and do these objectives, but all these things keep happening, and the gameplay is fun because of the jankiness and because of you're playing with your friends, and there's all these scenarios that you couldn't plan for, but just end up happening. And it's just like that. What is that? Emergent gameplay is really nice. And this game is really early access, but I mean, for a $10 buy-in, I'm all in to see where this is going. And it's got a lot of hype right now. So I'm really hoping that it'll just like carry it through, and the game will end up being really, really good.
Dang. Should I get this?
Yeah, should we all get this?
Let's play, dude. I'm so down.
The reason
it looks fun.
Kyle was just watching videos on Reddit and had to show me this video, and it was of a ladder that fell on somebody else, and it was the bonk sound it made. And I go, "What is this game?" And he goes to the comments and he's like, "Something called Lethal Company." And I'm like, "Oh, ladder makes silly bonk sound."
I know it's outselling the new Call of Duty game right now. It's really on fire right now. Yeah,
but it's also a 6 of the price.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, still,
it's going viral. It's popular.
A 7th of the price. Sorry, games are $70 now.
yeah, exactly. I'll go next real quick. I've been playing some games as well. Super Mario RPG. I've streamed a little bit more of that game. Really enjoying it. I picked up some games on Steam as well. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2. That's a game that I already had on my Switch that I kind of stopped playing back when we were all boycotting Activision games. But I guess I decided fuck it and bought it again. I gave Bobby Kotick even more money. But I mean, I love this game so much, and I really do think that Tony Hawk Pro Skater remake is a masterpiece, and just having it portably like on Steam now, actually at 60 frames per second, which is pretty essential for this game. It's just much better now, and I think even if I ever upgrade to the more modern Steam Deck OLED, I think it can play up to like 90 frames per second as well. So it's that's a game I'm kind of interested in trying out higher frame rates at, just because it makes like the gameplay that much like more fluid. It's sort of a game you actually feel a frame rate on. But anyway, I've played a couple other games. Fashion Police Squad is a game that I've had my eyes on for a while. You'll notice that Fashion Police Squad's acronym is FPS. That's because it is an FPS. It's kind of an old school first person shooter in the vein of like Doom and Quake and kind of games like that. It's kind of got a pixel art style. But instead of shooting and killing people in this game, you play a fabulous member of the Fashion Police Squad whose entire job it is to find people that are committing fashion crimes around the city and fix those fashion crimes. So like one of the guns that you have is like kind of a paint gun that you're adding color to like really drab suits. There's another gun that's like a sewing machine. So if somebody's wearing like really baggy clothes, you kind of tighten up their clothes and make them more form-fitting with the sewing machine. There's like a belt that you have that you can like, there are like these dudes that vape a lot and like they hurt you by shooting vape clouds at you, and you can like whip them with your belt in order to like pull their pants up and like make their pants better fitting and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like really interesting stuff in this game. The gameplay is really fun. It's a lot of fun to play on Steam Deck with like the gyro controls turned on and everything like that. This game is also on the Switch. I am curious like who the developers of this game are, because it's definitely giving a little bit of hello fellow queers to me. It's like there's definitely like some stereotypical like RuPaul's Drag Race like style, like, you know what I mean? It's like is that the only thing you guys know about like fashion? You know what I mean? Like whenever you kill people or whenever you shoot people, they'll be like yes and like slay and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, this is like kind of funny, but like a little bit on the nose. But either way, I'm having a really good time with the game. It's a really unique take on a first person shooter. And if you like old school FPSs like Doom and Quake, which I really do enjoy, or Duke Nukem is a really good example of a game that this is similar to. It's like that without the overt killing and murder, right? So I enjoy that about this game.
I had to look it up. So it's called Mopeful Games. They're a Finnish studio, and this appears to be their only game on Steam. So we'll see if their next game is also
just as fabulous.
I just also love the phrase for these type of games now it's called a boomer shooter.
I do like that. Yeah. It's very multifaceted there. Yeah, that definition. The last game I'll bring up real quick is a game that I got for free on Steam that actually said it was unsupported on Steam Deck, but it played on my Steam Deck. Not the best, but it's called The Complex Found Footage, and it is a Backrooms style game. I've never actually played a Backrooms game. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that genre, but it's basically kind of like an SCP kind of like thing where it's like, oh, we heard the story of this liminal space that is all like the back rooms of this 90s mall or something like that you can get lost in. And usually in these games, there's some sort of like monster or some sort of entity or being in the back rooms that you have to run away from.
Is Five Nights at Freddy's classify? Is that what that is?
No, Backrooms is much more like Backrooms. I mean, I would say it's kind of similarly liminal in that it's kind of like set in the 90s and kind of plays on horror nostalgia style. But Backrooms is very much more like nondescript, like wallpaper walls, endless space, almost kind of like. Did you ever read that book, House of Leaves? It's kind of like that idea of like a house that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's kind of like this impossible space that you're going through. Something that I like about the Complex Found Footage, other than the fact that it's free and is a game you can beat in 45 minutes, is that it is kind of going back to the walking simulator element of this game rather than an overt survival horror game where there's like a monster chasing you. This is, as far as I know, and this is probably a spoiler because I didn't know whether or not there was a monster in this game when I played it. As far as I know, there is no monster chasing you. It's just vibes, and I think that was something that I was really not anticipating. And it was a game that I had a lot of enjoyment with. The whole thing has this kind of like hand DV cam found footage look too that is just incredible looking. Like it just feels so visceral and realistic. Because of that, at times it was playing at like 12 FPS on my Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is definitely not the kind you want to have a nice beefy computer to really play this correctly. But I mean, playing it at a low frame rate kind of added to the vibes and like made it feel really kind of scary and like I was very limited. And so, and then I would go to certain areas where it would play a lot more smooth and certain areas chugged a little bit more. But I had a really surprisingly great time with this game. And I'll say this, I played it at like 1:30 in the morning lying in bed on my Steam Deck and I was fucking terrified. I had the tinglies, I had the heebie-jeebies. It was a really scary game, but a really unique experience. So I would definitely recommend The Complex if you're looking for a backroom style game that is not so much about like the action and the horror and the suspense and a lot more just about like vibing out and doing walking simulator stuff. I really, really enjoyed this one a lot. What about you, Summer? What have you been playing?
Yeah, I played a lot, and just because I was like with a lot of people, so I had kind of just snippets into quite a few games this past week. The first game I want to talk about, it's called Retro Raccoons. It is specifically an arcade cabinet that is like specific to like the northern Midwest. I'm pretty sure it's out of Ohio. So the only times that we've gotten to play it have been at like anime conventions in the Midwest. Like we played it earlier this year at ASA, and we played it a lot this past week at Colossal Con North. What's really interesting about it is that it does have cup holders built in and a drinking games mode. So this game, it's all micro games. And you don't know what it's going to be until it's the game to play. So when I was playing it for the first time, I was like, wait, is this just WarioWare, but with raccoons? So it'll be like one mode will be like trivia and you all have to jump on the platform with the right answer, or sometimes it'll be like a giant platform is going to come crush you, and you want to make sure that you don't get crushed, but you could also push your fellow players into a spot where they could get crushed. Stuff like that. At any time that we weren't doing something else, we were back in the arcade playing Retro Raccoons. That being said, drink more glurp. I now own this on the Switch, so if anybody wants to play Drink More Glurp with me, and I own it because somebody in our cabana took my Switch controller and said, I'm going to pay you $10 back, goes to my eShop and purchases Drink More Glurp. And how do I explain this? It's just chaotic. You earn different controls to control your character. It reminds me of the game where you could only use certain keys on the keyboard to move your character around.
Co-op.
But it's like that, but multiplayer and with a lot of different objectives.
Cool.
Then Unbeatable was a game that when I was at my sister's place waiting for her to finish up work, she was like, play this game on my Steam Deck. So this was my Steam Deck experience of me deciding if I wanted one or not. And it's simple controls, rhythm game, gets more complex as you play through. The music in it is really stellar. Had a lot of fun with that. I just added it to my wish list. I love
the visual style. It looks like Kill la Kill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I believe it's free and you can purchase more songs for it as DLC.
Ooh.
So definitely play that one tonight. I'm still making my way through Fire Emblem Blazing Blade. I am now officially on the chapter where I gave up last time, and I can remember why, because I thought I was really trucking through it. And on this map, I had a unit die, and I really had this. This is the second time this has happened to me in this game where I'm like, if I did not have save states, I don't know that I would have, I would maybe continue and let that character die. And I felt too bad about it. So I quit and I was like, I'm going to restart this map, but I'm not going to restart it right now. So I'm going to go back to playing Super Mario RPG, which I also purchased while I was, so I'm also playing it now. I just got to the forest where the iconic Beware the Forest Mushrooms plays, and I've been singing it and listening to covers of it all day long today. It has infected me. I am actually kind of still waiting for the moment to hook me. Right now I'm just kind of trusting that I'm going to like the game. I understand that it is like, you guys talked a lot on the episode about how it doesn't like technically have a sequel to it. But I do know that like the folks who worked on it did then go on to make specifically Paper Mario and the 1,000-Year Door, which I really, really love. And I do feel like that's what they're setting up with these remakes as well. So I'm just going to keep trusting it and keep playing it. I'm not disliking it, but I really resonated a lot with like what Patrick was saying about like, it's been easy for me to just kind of bounce in between other games. Yes, Super Mario RPG and Persona 5 Tactica came out on the same day, but so did Fashion Dreamer, which is the Switch sequel to Style Savvy Trendsetters, which is games that I've loved on the 3DS. Don't talk about them too much because like they're fashion games. I'm still getting through it. It's very different from the old games though. So I'm still kind of figuring all of that out. Instead of owning a boutique and like winning in fashion shows, which is what you did in the previous games, you were an influencer who makes looks for other characters and influencers. I just got to the part where you get to create your own showroom, which I'm understanding is like a new aspect to this. I do not think I have unlocked everything that this game has to offer. I remember that was how the older games functioned too, is that you just kept unlocking new aspects of it and it became very layered in that way. So I don't want to say I'm like super trepidatious. I'm like enjoying the styling. You get to do a lot of your own designing of actual clothes, which you didn't get to do in the previous games. It was just more about making the looks. Now you're actually making your own looks, and then game registers like all of the different assets of the looks that, or like the clothes that you're making. And then when you're making those looks, so it's a lot more complicated in that way, which I'm enjoying so far. And And it might be, I'm going to be bouncing between that and Super Mario RPG, and maybe one will pull me more than the other. We'll see.
Fashion Dreamer looks fun. I've heard it's really good from a lot of people that are playing it right now.
Yeah, I get the games aren't for everybody, but like if you're into just something that's like simple, well, I don't want to say simple, but like low stakes, it's really fun for that reason. All of this to say, I am not done with Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
All right, well, that's gonna do it for our episode on wind. Thank you to milkyway.co for doing our website. Thank you to Corduroy for doing our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me most places online as PDYX.
You can find me at Weebwitched.
You can find me online at Bordan on Discord, Instagram, and Letterboxd.
I'm pretty much ever on the internet at Monolith Fiji. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we're at Switch Headz, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook. We got a website, switchheadz.com. Go visit that website, gang. And then also, you can find a Discord and a Facebook group in the description of this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube, which we recommend. There's a lot of great video content in today's episode. If you would listen to this one, go back, watch the whole thing again on YouTube. And then also on Spotify, iTunes, we'll have the link in there as well. Make sure you shoot us subscribes and leave us reviews wherever you can on any of these platforms. We appreciate that. That's going to do it for this episode on wind. Oh, man, we did it. I've been wanting to do an episode on wind for a long time. We got a lot of like backlog episode ideas that I'm excited to kind of like finally get out to you guys. This is a fun one. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, so don't go anywhere. But in the meantime, gang, you know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Let's pass gas together. Let's pass the wind. Let's fart around like Wario. I'll see you guys next week. We love you very much. Bye-bye.